Welcome back to another episode of the UK Brewery Project, and this time we're going to be looking at St. Peter's Brewery. St. Peter's Brewery was founded by John Murphy in May 1995. The brewery itself was built in a former agricultural building in St. Peter's in Suffolk. So John Murphy's background was actually in branding. He started a company called Interbrand, which gave McVitie's the Hobnob name, along with creating names such as Homebase, Viagra, and even the Ford Mondeo. It was a very successful business, and he floated it in 1994, and it's with this money that he used to start St. Peter's Brewery. Now, Murphy, from previous experience, was aware at that stage in the 90s that hardly any English ales were being exported. He seen St. Peter's Hall for sale and purchased it, and then set about refurbishing it and also building a brewery in the outbuildings behind. Now, Murphy considered the name St. Peter's as a distinct sort of brand name, which could help sell the product overseas. Alongside this, he opted for that oval bottle, which they've become famous for, which was, I believe it was based off an old gin bottle he had found at an antiques fair. The water for the beer comes from a borehole 100 metres below the brewery, and they use local grown barley and wheat. And to sell the beer, well, Murphy, of course, opened a pub in central London, the Jerusalem Tavern. You can see this is a different story than other brewery startups I've covered before on the UK Brewery Project, in the sense of it's come more from a marketing angle rather than someone who is enjoying beer and wants to sell beer. The first cask ales produced by them were in June 96, and the first bottles were released in Feb 97, and it wasn't long before he had actually managed to get the beers stocked in Tesco's nationwide. Now, I can't find details of what their first brew was, but based off articles I've read and quotes in the articles, I'm assuming it would have been a bitter. Now, the only bitter I have of theirs here, is their best bitter. This is 3.7%, and I'll get this open. And as I say, that distinctive oval bottle shape that you immediately recognise as St. Peter's. Let's get this poured out. There we go. Nice good measure. I do like the colour branding on the labels as well that they've got, making each one sort of distinct. So there we go, very clear. They are filtered beers, that's what they've always sold. So a nice clear beer with a nice one finger tight white head on top. Nose-wise, it's a bitter. Yeah, malty. Yeah, mainly malts that I'm getting off that. Let's tuck in and have a taste of it. Yeah, a little bit of bitterness, a bit of caramel sweetness maybe to it as well. It's nothing stand out as a beer for me. I've not been a huge fan, I would say, of their bitters, but yeah, it does the job. 3.7%, it's a bitter. It's decent and you can drink it. So sort of just to continue the theme that I say that the launch of this brewery was unlike any others at the time. They didn't stick to brewing sort of a core staple of 3 or 5 beers, but instead they were producing 12 to 15 core beers. And these weren't just, as I say, your standard bitters or IPAs and stouts. They were making fruit beers, wheat beers, and even spiced ales. In 2002, a bottling line was installed because as previously they were outsourcing this, but when 80% of their beer was in bottle, it would make sense to invest in the bottling line. It was also around this time they staged this time they teamed up with Muntons to create the home brew kit, and I think it was first bitter, and they've done other beers that have joined that line over the years as well, such as the cream stout. By 2005, their brewing capacity was expanded. So I believe it was originally a 10-barrel brewery, and they were producing about 29,000 pints a week. And they then added another 10-barrel onto it. And by that stage, then it meant they'd increased their production to about 56,000 pints a week, which is just shy of 3 million a year. And they were producing, at this stage, about 18 different varieties. And as you can see, they're still producing massive varieties to date as well. They've carried on that whole theme. They were supplying cask ale to 70 odd pubs at this stage as well in 2005. But it should be noted that it was about 75% bottled beers, or no, 75% of their bottled beers that they're producing, which I don't know the number at this stage, but 75% of their bottled beers were being shipped overseas to countries such as US, Canada, and Russia. And that's exactly what he's going for. As I said, he looked at that market and seen that people weren't shipping beers overseas. The furthest they were shipping to was Calais for the booze cruises at that stage. So he had cornered or targeted a certain market. I think it's worthwhile going on to another beer at this stage. Now, there's normally a lead in, and for this, I'm just going to have to sort of say, we're talking about 2005. For St. Peter's in 2004, 2005, there was one beer that was sort of winning lots of awards for them and standing out, and that is the Old Style Porter. This is 5.1%, and to go with it, I have a lovely St. Peter's Brewery glass. Now, I've only just cleaned it, and I don't know if it's had long enough to dry, so let's see how the beer takes in it. Maybe I should pour that way to stop the noise so much, but there we go. Let's agitate the beer a bit to create a bit of head. Not the normal sort of glassware I'd have a stout in. This is more something I would say that looks Pilsner lager style. But there we go. Their glass has obviously details about St. Peter's Hall and when it was originally created, 1280s and 1539 and dates like that. But that's nothing to do with the brewery. That's the hall itself where he bought the house. Right, let's have a nose of this and see. Okay, wow. I will say, yeah, that's very chocolatey and wow, big chocolatey stout. Let's have a quick taste of this then. Lovely tan head on it. I would say, again, for me, it's okay. I was expecting a bit more maybe of this sort of porter. It says licorice and rum and raisins with a hint of rich fruit cake. I would say chocolate, maybe a bit of raisins, maybe in a little bit of cherry coming through as well for me, but it's a porter. It will do. Again, as you can sort of sense them. I'm on the fence with their beers. They are beers you can drink, yes, but they're not anything stand out that make me go, oh, I want to grab a St. Peter's. But I haven't tried all their range, and well, obviously at some stage I'm going to be drinking all of these. And I know there are some people like a bit more than others, particularly when it comes to the cream stout, which I couldn't get my hands on, and I think the plum porter, which I've had, but I still think Titanic's plum porter is better than that. But there we go. So let's move on. By about 2010, St. Peter's were producing over 4 million pints a year, and I think about 40% of this 4 million was being exported. which by my math seems like a drop in their exports. Now, I said 75% of the bottles were going before and they're producing 3 million. Now this is 40% of 4 million. Either way, it seems like a drop. And it potentially was, because 2010 was also the first year they recorded a loss in their 15 years running at that stage. In 2009, it had made a profit of £171,000, but in 2010, it made a loss of £36,000. Now, they state this was due to tough trading conditions, increased costs. In particular, for these bottles, they said their costs went up by £160,000. And that's probably the price you pay for distinctive bottles. And also, potentially, Murphy's decision to take a wage for the first time of £130,000, which could explain it, but you can't work for free for that long and not take a wage. So it was impressive that he held off 15 years in a sense before he took a wage. In 2010, they decided to start branching away from their mainly bottle-led model. And I'm assuming this was led by that increased bottle costs and the idea that the export market perhaps had dropped off a bit with the financial crash in a sense that happened previously. And so they started putting a bit more of their beers into casks to sell to pubs. So it's worthwhile saying that over the years they have adapted to market changes. So in 2007, they launched a gluten-free beer. In 2012, they launched their first 100% organic beer. And 2017, they launched their without range, so the alcohol-free range of beers. So they, to include these beers, they've also had to increase their brewery capacity again by about 60%. And my current figures that I've got for them, they're brewing about 98,000 pints a week. They've continued to seek out new overseas markets such as Australia and China, and are now exporting to over 30 countries. Quick sip. Wet the tongue. Prior to the pandemic, the bottles made up about 90% of all their production, and it was about half of this going overseas. So that's still a huge number compared to how other breweries are in the UK, where production that goes overseas, they are well above the rest. So marketing wise, he's managed that perfectly to do that. But in January 21, after running the business for about 23 years, John Murphy decided to retire, and he sold on St. Peter's to a group of private individuals for an undisclosed sum. So the new CEO is called Derek Jones, who's worked in the beer industry for over 20 years, including spells at Molson Coors and Sav Miller. The new group have stated their commitment to grow the business and invest in the brewery in Suffolk, which is good, meaning that they're going to stay true to the heritage there. But it does seem one of the first changes is they've given up their lease on the Jerusalem Tavern, which since 1996 had been the only St. Peter's pub. I believe it's actually reopened this week under the new name Holy Tavern, but the new owners might still stock some of the St. Peter's beer brands. Another taste of the bitter at this stage. Right, I'm going to move that one to the side, because I'm going to have another one of the beers cracked open. Yes, I'm going for a third one. So one of the new beers launched with the new owners has been the English whiskey beer. Now, this one sounds interesting to me just because of how it's all put together. I will put the stout up there for the moment. Let's get this one open. And into the glass. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to like this one, only because it is a golden ale by default, but they've teamed up with what is England's oldest whiskey company. Now, obviously, England's not famous for whiskey, Scotland is, but England's oldest whiskey company called the English Whiskey Company, and they've added a measure. I don't know exactly how much because this is only 4.8%, but I've added a measure of whiskey to the beer at this stage. So we have their normal clear golden ale with a thin but tight white head. Oh, wow. Okay, okay, wow. This is totally different than I was expecting straight away. I was expecting golden ale, especially with colour and look, but I'm really intrigued. That smells smoked. That smells smoked. Oh dear, this could be really good. Oh, that has redeemed everything for me. All their other beers, wow, that is a really, really good smoked beer. I'm loving that. I didn't even read that it was going to be smoked or anything at this stage. Yeah, a superb golden beer with smoky overtones of peated malt. That, right up my street, right up my street. Loving that. Ah, I do love my peaty whiskies, but I do love a good smoked beer. And I wasn't expecting a smoked beer from them, but as I say, they produce so many different beers across so many different types and varieties. It's crazy. Yeah, I'm loving that one. That's definitely immediately going up in my, well, the whole beer's going up. So I might as well talk about their core beers now. So as I touched upon earlier, they have quite a large range of core beers. In cask and keg, they have obviously the best bitter at 3.7%. They also do an organic version of this, which is coming in at 4.1%. They have the organic pale ale at 4.5%. They have the India pale ale at 5.5. They have the plum porter at 4.6, and they have the old style porter at 5.1. And they've got the ruby red ale here at 4.3, and the cream stout, which I mentioned before, which is at 6.5%. In cask only, they do an English pale ale at 3.8%. They do the Gatekeeper Golden here at 4%. They do the Citrus at 4.7, the Suffolk Gold at 4.9, the Honey Porter at 4.5, and they've got one called Stateside Pale Ale at 4.2. In keg only, they have, I've got it here, White Raven, which is a 4.7% wheat beer. They've also got their first lager, which is Revival, a 4.2% Pilsner. And then they've got a cider called Raven's Orchard at 4.6%. Now, I've stated cask only, keg only, but I believe all of those are in bottle format to purchase. It's just the draft format is only keg or cask. Alongside that, they also have their alcohol-free range of beers. So the St. Peter's Without. So here I have the Without Gold, 0.0%. I've only tried one of their Without beers and I wasn't a huge fan of it. It tasted like shredded wheat to me, sadly. But there you go. So they do, I say the gold here, which is the golden ale. They do the original bitter and they do the organic pale ale as well. And they also do, many one-offs and seasonal. So I've got the winter ale here. They do a Christmas beer as well. And I've also got one here, which is the Farmers Flagon, which is in celebration of the National Farmers Union 100 year celebration in Suffolk. Award-wise, so the big one for them really was the Old Style Porter here won the Champion Beer of Suffolk in 2005 for CAMRA, and then it became the bronze winner of the CAMRA Winter Beer Festival, so overall bronze in 2007. So that's the highest accolade awards I think that they've received. But they have won many regional CAMRA and SEBRA awards in their history. Only sort of last year, the Cream Stout won gold in SEBRA's strong beer category, and the Plum Porter won bronze in the medium to dark beer category, or specialty medium to dark beer category, because obviously it's flavoured. But yeah, that's just been a sort of brief run through and history of the St. Peter's Brewery, which I say is different than how the other breweries in this series have really been set up, where it's been more set up to target the overseas market and bottles rather than targeting the domestic market or local market. So it's a different take on why a brewery was set up and exists. I've had the bitter, which, as I say, is a very drinkable bitter, but nothing stand out for me. But it definitely one that I could drink. If I seen a pub, I would drink it. But I don't think I would go hunt down a bottle, which sadly is where most of their sales come through. Then we've got the old style porter, which has won many awards, but as I said, I'm only really getting the roasted malts, a bit of chocolate, maybe a bit of raisin, maybe, and a bit of cherry. That's what I'm getting. But the standout winner for me on the beers that I've tasted on here, it's the St. Peter's whiskey beer. So this is the English. What do they call it? The whiskey beer, the English? Yeah, I think it's called the whiskey beer, but it's with the English distillery. That is one I'm going to savour and enjoy, but I'll also see you guys out with. Take care, everyone. See you soon.